Good morning, everybody. David T.I. here. Man, it's been a rough week. I got my V2K talking about my grandparents, talking about, yeah, don't you wish your grandparents were here and all that. But they know stuff like that aggravates me. Then they interrogate me. David, why'd you do that? What are you doing? They're doing all kinds of stuff like that with V2K, running all kinds of scripts and stuff. And speaking of scripts, today we're going to talk about scripts, like Sleeping Beauty script. They name these scripts Disney characters and Bible stuff and religious stuff. Different names, like Satan, silent assassination through adaptive networks, Tammy, thought and mind interface, Alice is artificial linguistic, and it's going to talk about Alice. I think we're getting to it today. If not, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure in this book it gets to Alice then. So I'm going to start with the Sleeping Beauty script. How Sleeping Beauty script, sleeper agents and disposable CIA agents. How are remote sleeper agents trained? Remote sleeper agents are the same as remote controlled proxy soldiers, which is done through brain signal cloning programming, behavior condition, and the radio frequency hearing effect. Creating depressing or using people who are depressed is traditional because they have less brain activity in the frontal lobes, which are used to control will and motivation. This makes them more susceptible to brainwashing and programming techniques. Lack of sleep breaks down the will too. You hear that? That's why they sleep deprive us. The idea is to take control. Creating depression or using people who are depressed traditional because they have less brain activity, which are used to control will and emotion. Then makes them more susceptible to brainwashing and programming techniques. Lack of sleep breaks down the will too. The idea is to take control of the sense of self and the will of the person. Excessive stress and torture causes brain changes from cortisol in the frontal lobe, and prolonged pain shrinks the brain. In physical renditions, a brainwashing technique called the sleeper room, the necessary torture and stresses are produced, followed by massive sleep. Sleep reinforces the programming and lessens into long term behavioral changes. The same can be done with remote renditions. We're going to go to a side note real quick. Interviewer, how are you activated and how are your instructions communicated? Sleeper agent, preconditioned tones, cell phone, TV, radio, face to face, computer, microwave hearing effect with Morse code or voice payphones, etc. It's random each time so that they can't easily be caught without vast resources. Question, how often are you contacted? Answer, once or twice a month. But since President Obama took office, it had been less. What have you been asked to do? Answer, I won't tell you everything. Generally, the mission seems to have little purpose. For example, I'll be asked to go to a location, strike up a conversation with people around me, and use specific phrases. Other time, it is to give them names of government officials who are rumored to be corrupt. Also give them ideas of infrastructure weaknesses and clever silent assassination plots. Brainstorm from various people and personalities. Obviously, they're looking to entrap people or blackmail them. Wow. Question, why do you do what you're told? Answer, if you've been through the torture programs, you wouldn't want to ask that question. I don't want to be tortured and I don't want my family killed as they have threatened many, many times. I've met many targets uh, who have thought this, have thought this way. I don't want to be tortured again and I don't want my family killed. All right, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs script. The fable. Snow White eats the poison apple, falls into a slumber. The Seven Dwarfs are the scripts and Egan vectors of segmentation of emotional control and personality simulations. The mind hackers generally use Disney themes to name their illegal clandestine programs and torture and brainwashing since the 90s. It's debatable whether the apple was the forbidden fruit in the Adam and Eve biblical tales. Eigenvectors are a mathematical construct to describe perfect orthogonal vectors in variable space for correlation. This can be color perception of the eyes or emotional centers of the brain. Eigenvectors are used in many fields such as product marketing. Our interest is in using it for emotional analysis of humans. It appears there are 7 major vectors in emotional centers of the brain that give rise to the spectrum of emotions, and just how the 3 cones of the retina give rise to other spectrum of the rainbow and perception. This is why the program is called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If you notice, you got sleepy, sneezy, dopey. So you got all them 7 dwarfs, so you can imagine what goes on in them scripts. Other scripts. The power is in the scripts, the mind hacking informant said. There are numerous other scripts that are used on remote mind control projects. They would fill volumes, but we would just mention a few so the reader can understand where the inspiration comes from. The power is in the scripts. The technology is merely the means. Humpty Dumpty script is about breaking the target's mind to pieces, and all the king's horses and men can't put him back together again. This is another program to crack the human mind. The agents get their ideas for scripts from tales and movies, while other movies are inspired by victims of government misdeeds, dishonor, and disgrace. The Matrix inspired a version of Jesus complex that one man will save the world. The Borg and Star Trek enslaves every living creature using cybernetics. Alien invasions have been popular since the 1940s, and of course, the book 1984 inspired an all seeing eye in Big Brother. The reader should get the point. Here's discussions questions to think about. What purposes do scripts serve? For example, if a target describes the Bible script being done to them, any observer would just assume they had read the Bible and is having a psychotic break from reality. Can you think of any other benefits to this kind of trickery? Some targets will believe that an alien or omnipotent force is behind this technology and evil. The reason they will see all these connections between their experience and culture events. In the next session, we'll study some of the Pentagon counter-resistant techniques. One is to make the target believe that the handlers are omnipotent and know everything. The scripts also serve to misdirect the anger of the target away from the U.S. government and to some ghost, alien, or demon. The scripts keep the program soldiers on track and a repeatable way to train them to do their illegal work. A free-for-all would be less effective, and the effects might not be reproducible. The ABCs of enhanced interrogation and torture. There is no rest for the wicked, a rough boy, CIA interrogator and brainwashing expert said to me during sleep deprivation experiments. An interviewed American Caucasian male, torture and behavior modification experiment 2006. Experimental interrogation and behavior modification techniques. You do what they taught us. Yeah. You do what they told you. You do what they torture. Rage Against the Machine. So, experimental interrogation and behavior modification techniques. Physical torturers in the U.S. have traditionally been called rough boys. Euphemisms in the DoD and CIA are traditional. Changing the language of torture, such as modern day enhanced interrogations or experimental interrogation, helps the general populace sleep at night without knowing what they are really supporting. Extraction of information involves breaking down the will of the subject, confusing and tricking them. Let's quickly cover some of the basics. The use of sodium pentanol, LSD, BZ, henbane, scopolamine, and many other drugs created by the TSS chemical division helps to confuse the target or instill fear in them. During physical or remote renditions, making time appear to pass faster through sleep deprivation and memory erasing techniques allows the interrogator to use falsely dated newspapers, sleep alteration and isolation, and accelerated clocks to try to get to the subject to brag about an event before it actually happens. They include trickery and false confessions verbally. Using voice transformation and video altered tapes helps in this process. In a sleep-deprived state or drug-induced state, haze doppelgangers of people whom the target recognizes are used to extract information. Doppelganger is the mythological shapeshifter taking on appearances of other people. In psychology, it is the illness where a person believes that the real people have been possessed or substituted. In information extraction, it is really done by mask and voice transformation using speech samples of the real people. And I've been through this. Speech samples of the real people. I hear my ex-wife's voice. I hear my sister's voice. Man, in wireless renditions, potentially people around the target are also being mind controlled. It can even be done through spoofed emails. This is also called spoofing in information warfare. See spoofing and authority and trust level hacking. And I'm going to go down here to the side note. So we got 33. So where was 33 at? 33, the ABCs of enhanced interrogation and torture, taken from the released Pentagon documents. All right, now 34 is right here. A rough boy is what it says. Rough boys is an old term for torturers and interrogators. George Bush and Dick Cheney helped start a school of rough boys. George Bush even redefined the English word torture during his regime to enhanced interrogation. the altering of the common understanding of a word to form a mass neurolinguistic programming. All right, now we're going to go to the all right, so it's important. I'm going to read this last thing again. Hold on. In information extraction, it is really done by mask and voice transformation using speech samples of the real people. In wireless renditions, potentially, people around the target are being mind controlled. It can even be done through spoofed emails. This is also called spoofing in information warfare. In communication warfare, a similar technique of voice transformation is used to misdirect enemy commanders by faking mobile phone or other communications to their command structure. In physical renditions and interrogations by the DoD, CIA, suffocation, burning, and other pain techniques are applied. No-touch torture employs analogs of these barbaric methods. In human trials, the CIA is comparing the effectiveness of remote technology techniques with the traditional physical torture methods. Suffocation techniques, waterboarding, cellophane wrap over the face, throat grabs, supergluing nostrils, etc. Burning techniques, ADS, active denial of service, microwave weapons, hot needles in the flesh, hot pokers and the equivalent, pain-inducing techniques, soft spots such as eardrums, groin, other nerve pressure points, fear induction techniques, fear up harsh techniques including threatening dogs, insects, dropping a pit of boiling water, dropping in a pit of boiling water threats to kill their family, killing a person in front of them, or mock killings of their family and mock abductions. Sexual humiliation is pretty common in breakdown techniques. Here we have a quote from an interview of a United States citizen torture subject. We are showing you a video of us abducting and killing your mother, they would say. At first, I gave it some plausibility, but then I noticed they were just showing me a clip from a television movie. Malodorance is yet another non-lethal weapon classification in the Navy. Interesting to note that the smell of schizophrenia, according to one psychiatric publication, is burned rubber. The smell is used in the remote mind control renditions too, but also includes ammonia and vinegar. Offensive induced taste tests like pencil lead, lemons, helps to modify the diet of the target as part of the breakdown and torture process. See Pentagon item T below for interrogation methods. Offensive images include visual images against the detainee's beliefs and values. For example, heterosexuals will be tortured by homosexuals, and vice versa. U.S. CIA recruits calling themselves Satanists don't pull any punches in these remote torture renditions. There will one day spring from the brain of science a machine or force so fearful in its potentialities, so absolutely terrifying that even the man, fighter, who would dare torture and death in order to inflict torture and death, will be appalled and so abandon war forever. Hundreds of techniques were declassed, and inventor of the electric chair and the light bulb said that. I'm going to repeat it again. There will one day spring from the brain of science a machine or force so fearful in its potentialities, so absolutely terrifying that even man, the fighter, who will dare torture and death in order to inflict torture and death, will be appalled and so abandon war forever. Thomas Edison. Hundreds of techniques were declassified in 2002 by the Pentagon to Congress. The Navy wanted these to remain top secret. The authors are going to list a few of them and give real examples from government torture projects whom we have interviewed. Independent investigators have classified these techniques from interviewing over 650 targets, but they did not know the names of the techniques used until they were released by the Pentagon to Congress in 2002. The additional comments are in red and gray, and they were not included in the techniques copied from the DoD non-form documents, which are in black. Side note, some original declassified Pentagon documents. And I'm going to read this. Sorry, I got a cold. I'm going to read this in the best I can. Okay, it says interrogation techniques. The use of techniques A through X is subject to the general safeguards as provided below, as well as specific implementation guidelines to be provided by the appropriate authorities. Specific implementation guidance respect techniques is provided in the Army Field Manual. Further implementation guidance in respect techniques will need to be developed by the appropriate authority. Of the techniques forth below, the policy of certain techniques should be considered to the extent those policy aspects reflect the views of other major U.S. partner nations. Directs asking straightforward questions. removal of incentive, providing a reward or removing a privilege and above or beyond that are required by the Geneva Convention from the detainees. Caution, other nations that believe that the databases are entitled to prisoner of war protections may consider that provision and rendition of religious something, the Quran, the Bible, are protected under international law. Although the provisions of the Geneva Convention are not applicable to the interrogation of unlawful combatants, consideration should be given to their views prior to the application of the techniques. Emotional love, playing on a love detainee for an individual or group. Emotional hate, playing on the hatred a detainee has for an individual or group. So, therefore, what they're saying is playing on the hatred a detainee has for an individual group. So I might be trying to get this person to talk about somebody and be like, yeah, you know, you hate this person. He done this, just to strike up a conversation and get you to talk about somebody you hate. Fear up harsh, significantly increasing the fear level in the detainee. Fear up mild, moderately increasing the fear level in the detainee. Reduced fear, reducing the fear level in the detainee. Pride and ego up, boosting the ego of a detainee. So boosting the ego, talking up on them and bragging on them and all that. Classified by the Secretary of Defense. Okay, let's see what this says. Pride and ego down, attacking or insulting the ego of a detainee not beyond the limits that would apply to a prisoner of war. Prisoners of war who refuse answers may not be threatened, insulted, or exposed to any unpleasant or disadvantaged treatment of any kind. Other nations that believe the detainee are entitled to POW protections may consider this technique inconsistent with the provisions of Geneva. Although the provisions of Geneva are net applicable to the interrogation of unlawful combatants, consideration should be given to these views prior to application of the techniques. Futility, invoking the feeling of futility of a detainee. We know all, convincing the detainee interrogator knows the answer to the question that he asked the detainee. Establishing your identity, convincing the detainee that the interrogated has mistaken the detainee for someone else. Repetition approach, continuously repeating the same question to the detainee while the interrogation periods of normal duration. File endosser, convincing detainee that the interrogator has a damning and inaccurate file which must be fixed. Mutt and Jeff, a team consisting of a friendly and harsh interrogator. The harsh interrogator might employ the pride and ego down technique. Cessation. Other nations believe that the prisoners of war protections applied to detainees may view this technique as inconsistent with Geneva. Rapid fire, questioning in rapid succession without allowing the detainee to answer. Staring at the detainee to encourage discomfort. I don't know what that's called. Change of scenery up, removing the detainee from the standard interrogation setting, generally to a location more pleasant but no worse. Change of scenery down, removing the detainee from the standard interrogation and placing it into a setting that may be comfortable would not constitute a successful change in environment quality. Dietary manipulation, changing the diet of the detainee, no intended deprivation of food or water, no adverse medical or cultural effect, and without the intent to deprive subject of food and water. Unclassified, environmental manipulation, according to the environment to create moderate discomfort, adjusting temperature, or inducing unpleasant smell. Conditions would not be such that they would injure the detainee. Detainee would be accompanied by an interrogator at all times. Sleep adjustment, adjusting the sleeping times of the detainee. Reverse sleep cycles from night to day. The technique is not sleep deprivation. This technique is not sleep right. Convincing the detainee the individuals from a country other than the United States are interrogating him. False flag. Isolation. Isolating the detainee from the other detainee while still complying with the basic standards of treatment. The use of isolation as interrogation techniques requires detailed implementation instructions, including specific guidelines regarding the length of isolation, medical and psychological review, and approval for extensions of the length of the isolation by the appropriate level in the chain of command. This technique is not known to have been generally used for interrogation purposes for longer than 30 days. though nations that believe that detainees are subject to prisoner of war protections may view use of this technique inconsistent. Memorandum for the Commander, U.S. Southern Command. Subject: Counter-resistant techniques in the title in the War on Terrorism. I have considered the report of the working group that I directed to be established January 15, 2003. I approve the use of specific counter-resistant techniques. The technique I authorize are lettered A to Z and set out. These techniques must be used with all the safeguards. Use techniques anyway, so. In your views, requiring, okay, good enough work for the government. Declassify on April 2013 is what it says. Okay, so I'm going to read these and then I'm going to end it for today. Emotional love, psychological interrogation strategies, very important. Emotional love, playing on the love of a detainee for so I'm going to do it again and just give these examples. Emotional love, playing on the love a detainee has for an individual. Example, using threats of killing their loved ones, or in brainwashing, using imagery, love to motivate a Manchurian candidate. Example, President Reagan's shooter. Emotional hate, playing on the hatred a detainee has for Visual, using hate to divide and concur and fight, incite inflicting groups or start wars. Also make targets isolate themselves from negative vocabulary. Targets often accuse a racial or religious group for their suffering. Fear up harsh, significantly increasing the fear level in a detainee. Example, panic. We are going to kill you. We're going to destroy your life, make you homeless. Threats of more torture, making the target paranoid and believe everyone's out to get them and in on their torture. G, reducing fear, reducing the fear level in the detainee. We will let you go, creating false hope that the target's been pardoned. Torture sequence stops for a few hours or days. H, pride and ego, boosting the ego of a detainee. These examples were gathered from real interviews of tortures and brainwash. However, this is rare amongst the targets that we interview. The idea is to constantly try to boost the ego of the target. You are the smartest guy we know. You're the one that will beat us, or you're the national treasure. You're the best thing, such and such, we've ever seen. This also includes the Jesus complex or prophet complex for other religions. Pride and ego down. Examples: you're ugly. You're too dumb to stop us. You're fat. This is the most common type of verbal breakdown detained. I mean, utilized. J, futility, invoking the feeling of futility of a detainee. Examples: we are all powerful and control the media and politicians. No one can stop us now. Other examples are on how shielding techniques don't work very well against biocommunication weapons. Resistance is futile. We know all. Convincing a detainee and the interrogator knows the answers to questions he asked the detainee. Examples: this is similar to omnipotence techniques. By showing the detainee they have done some basic research into their background, they establish an all-knowing eye. They use this to demonstrate that they know more than they really do. The objective is to get the detainee to tell more about the events surrounding the information that they provided, then walking them back through their history by short-term memory erasure using sleep deprivation and other methods like drugs. The CIA thinks these techniques are top secret, but they have been published in every language. This book is focused on remote neural rendition, so we compare the physical captive techniques with how they map to other kinds of tools. Later in this book, the reader will learn about scripts and tricks. Omnipotent scripts are the most complex and expensive to do on a remote rendition target. Scaling the economic efficiency of the script requires a torture, interrogation, brainwashing schools to reuse them. This is partially interesting technique, so we will dive into the psychological trickery, understanding that all magic, illusions, and trickery work by physics and psychology, and helps the human target understand how the DoD misdirection and deception works. This technique in the media hacking world baffles even the cleverest people. They often call it media stalking or other forms of stalking instead of the correct term of appearing omnipotent to the target. So the target, not understanding the billions of dollars to develop this weapon and techniques over time, sees the scripts as too big to be done by a small group of human beings. The technique is supposed to appear like a superintelligence. See the God and Alien scripts as cover stories and later in this book. The idea is to give keywords and phrases to the target through neural communication or operatives that are common to the target's culture, and thereby it will appear mass-controlled news media frequently enough. This helps gaslight the target. They will believe that the television, newspaper, and everyone speaking directly to them in their situation. Some of the most successful Manchurians in history have been used by the love plus media stalking to commit crimes. This is more commonly described as the unusual suspects. as the usual suspects. After their movie where everything is understood towards the end, many believe it's prophecy to the massive organization which the information is presented in the order of correlations in the human mind. While cybernetic hive minds and superintelligent structures are being developed, see swarm theory and Beowulf packs, the brainwashing and programming technique of omnipotence does not fully utilize this form of technology yet, but it will. Establish your identity, convincing the detainee that the interrogator has mistaken the detainee for someone else. Some victims of government experimentation and practice say that the conversations pretend that they have mistaken them for a terrorist or spy by the same name, and they need to update the dasha on the target. Repetition approach. Continuously repeating the same question to the detainee. This is also used in brainwashing and programming, often called psychic driving when expressed as a statement. Many targets say that they are asked the same question over and over. The technique is often combined with rapid-fire questions, multiple interrogators asking the same question. Files and dosers, convincing the detainee that the interrogator has a damning and inaccurate file which must be fixed. Using a target's guilt complex and a complete list of confessions of shame is acquired. This is used for further information gathering about the target. O. Mutt and Jeff, also known as good cop, bad cop. Several targets have been convinced their handler is trying to help them while others are out to get them. This is supposed to build trust. Rapid fire questioning, confuse the target's mind with who might be trying to hold back information and catch them lying in inconsistencies. Very old school techniques are still applied in high tech remote renditions too. Q. Silence, staring at the detainee to encourage discomfort. Example, stalking, invasion of privacy while she's using the restroom. V2K, we are watching you. She's looking right at us. In remote renditions, this is applied by showing images of eyes in their shared visual workspace in addition to the statements. Change the scenery up. He didn't put no example. Change the scenery down. Most targets are convinced through torture stimulus that if they keep traveling or moving, they can get away from the torture equipment. I went through that. 12 states in 6 months. This keeps them isolated and changes the scenery up and down. Dietary manipulation, tricking targets into believing their food was poisoned by ground operatives and altering their hunger desires accomplishes this technique. U. Environmental manipulation. The sense of hot or cold is induced into the target and is used in combination with techniques R and S, which would be change the scenery up and down. V. Sleep adjustment, adjusting the sleeping times of the detainee. For example, reversing sleep cycles from night to day. This technique is not sleep deprivation. Almost all of our interviewed targets describe uncontrollable drop-dead sleepiness or the reverse. Used to research Russian Lida machine, for example. Used to isolate the target from being able to work and can change the time perception of time. Been through that one too. Been through a bunch of these. W. False flag. Convincing the detainee the individuals from countries other than the United States are torturing and interrogating him. Examples. This technique is used beyond tricking people which country's doing it to them. Victims of government of torture are tricked into believing neighbors, bosses, and even agencies are responsible. Isolation. Isolating the detainee from the other detainees. Example, self-explanatory, but in remote renditions, this is done through paranoia, induction, pain, emotional control, and Alice chatterboxes. And the internet's a bearer of remote rendition as victims have formed support groups. All of this was released by the Pentagon despite un-American values of many grotesque human beings hiding in the crevices of national security. The reader should also look up the torture memos that have since been called sloppy legal reasoning and illegal. They were also greatly disputed by the CIA Act directors, but thanks to the great Obama, a real America sent on a more intentional, internationally legal and moral path, they were released. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay, that's his opinion. Okay, what made you ask for political asylum in the U.S.? Interview with a Chinese dissident. Here's an interview side note. What made you ask for political asylum in the U.S.? Response, I believed at the time the Chinese government was torturing me using some kind of mind control radar weapon. I realize now that it was the U.S. tricking me to come over and spill dirty secrets about the Chinese government. I was used for U.S. propaganda on international news. Every civilization and country has had its history of torture tools and techniques. Some of these gruesome devices can be viewed in the Torture Museum in Amsterdam, Netherlands. The downside of the torturing in modern civilizations is the public reaction to the visual evidence of pain, death, and blood. The United States has overcome this problem with the use of neurological weapons and invisible pain rays. And next week we will pick up looking at some constant torture methods. So I hope everybody is having the best weekend they can. Um, Man, I'm just trying to, stay positive, try to stay in the Word of God, stay prayed up, stay praised up, um, and make it through all this, street theater, V2K being done on me, weapons, tax, and all that. Which I have to say, something about this mushroom tincture is helping in this very much so. So anyway, God bless all TIs, and I hope that y'all have the best weekend y'all can. And man, I hope y'all can find ways to deal with your targeting instead of waiting on these lawsuits and stuff to solve it for you. God bless.